Just after midnight, Buckingham Palace released a stark 47-word statement, its brevity only deepening national panic. Emergency medical consult initiated for His Majesty King Charles III. No cameras, no context, just silence. But those 47 words weren't random, they were designed. And what they didn't say is more chilling than what they did. Before we go deeper into what this really means, for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began not with an image, nor a press conference, but with silence so loud it echoed through every news channel and household. The digital feed of the Royal Press Office went dark precisely 5 minutes before the statement dropped, an eerie digital blackout that sent shockwaves through newsrooms. At 12:03 a.m., the carefully crafted phrase "emergency medical consult" was made public, but no signature accompanied it. It was a departure from the norm, both in tone and structure, and it carried a historical echo. Those well-versed in the language of royal crisis knew the word consult hadn't been used since the Queen's undisclosed spell of weakness in Balmoral in 2021. This wasn't routine, this wasn't rehearsed. It was a trigger. Notably, the statement omitted 2 names the public expected immediately: Camilla and William. Their absence raised suspicion faster than the palace could calculate. Where was the Queen Consort? Why had the heir apparent not released a parallel message of unity? Instead, a void. And in that void, the nation filled in its own horrors. Social media erupted. Cryptic tweets from royal reporters, sudden schedule cancellations, and one silent drone shot hovering over Windsor Castle began to piece together a mosaic of dread. Then came the realization that this wasn't just a medical concern, it was a political maneuver disguised as protocol. Sources whispered that Charles had been showing signs of disorientation over the last several weeks, something insiders labeled as episodic vacuums. But it was never confirmed. What was confirmed, however, was the unsettling speed with which the statement appeared far too fast for standard NHS consultation procedures. It smelled of palace lawyers, of hidden rooms, of succession being whispered behind closed doors, while the public stared at a blank screen. The deeper unease came from the uncanny symmetry with a statement made in 2002, the one before Queen Elizabeth, then in the twilight of her reign, disappeared from public view for weeks. It too had spoken of consultations. It too had lacked Camilla. That echo now returned almost 2 decades later, like a warning the monarchy had left unread until it was too late. And then, without explanation, the Royal Press Office ceased all responses. Calls redirected, emails bounced, news anchors fumbled for filler. Behind the gates, inside the most protected fortress of royal life, no one was talking. And when silence this deliberate descends, it never comes without cost. But before anyone could grasp the weight of the moment, private ambulances were spotted arriving at Windsor, shielded by palace staff carrying blackout tarps. Inside Windsor Castle, lights flickered past midnight, but no one entered or exited. For 7 hours, a press blackout gripped the estate. What unfolded in those soundproofed corridors between trembling aides and sealed doors was not just medical, it was political, dynastic, and deeply personal. As the gates of Windsor silently sealed behind the last unmarked vehicle, something unspoken yet unmistakable began to swell in the air. High alert status was declared within the royal inner circle, though no official would dare admit it publicly. The phrase "protocol clarion" was whispered like a code behind locked mahogany doors, signaling not just a health concern, but a constitutional contingency. Its activation is reserved for moments when the monarch's capacity is questioned, not when his pulse is merely checked. But it wasn't the presence of medical personnel that set alarms ringing, it was the arrival of those who weren't supposed to be there. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was seen being discreetly ushered into a part of the castle rarely associated with medical emergencies. Not the royal infirmary wing, but a secluded vault wing, where legacy documents and sealed directives are said to be kept under crown control. She carried no handbag, no briefcase, only a visibly sealed folder handed to her by an aide in gloves. Minutes later, the royal physician's familiar car pulled up, but it was followed by 3 unmarked vehicles that refused identification at the checkpoint, vehicles rumoured to carry specialists flown in from outside the UK. And still, No communication to the public. The most inexplicable twist came just before 3 a.m., when Lady Louise Windsor was spotted entering the estate. Her presence defied every pattern. She holds no official emergency role. She's not in the direct line of succession. And yet she was summoned. Staff reportedly paused in confusion as she was quietly handed a key code by a senior security aide. Royal insiders began whispering about a possible dynastic meeting, one that mirrored a secret assembly Queen Elizabeth once conducted during the early stages of her own succession recalibrations. If that comparison is accurate, then something irreversible may have already taken place within those walls. Inside, the environment turned suffocating. Multiple staff reported having their phones temporarily confiscated, a measure that hasn't been enacted since the day Prince Philip passed. The reason given was security filtration. But more disturbingly, 2 aides later confided that they were instructed to witness signatures on sealed documents, but not allowed to read them. One called it the most unnerving moment of my life, while another simply said, "We were being told without words this is the end of something." By the 5th hour, not even whispers could escape the halls. The kitchen staff was sent home, internal couriers were frozen, the chapel's night service was cancelled without explanation, and still Camilla was not seen. It was at this point that murmurs emerged about a royal last will, consult an ominous phrase used when legacy documents are formally updated, or in rare cases, triggered. The gravity of such a meeting, if it occurred, would signal that this was no longer about King Charles's immediate health, it was about his future power, or the lack thereof. But by morning, the silence was broken not by reassurance, but by the arrival of someone whose presence confirmed the storm had only just begun. Prince William was driven in through the rear entrance, no salutes, no public acknowledgement. He walked straight past Camilla, who was waiting by the east wing. Palace staff froze. Cameras caught her being ignored twice. This wasn't just concern for a father. This was power bypassing protocol. The moment William crossed the threshold of Windsor's inner court, the entire tempo of the crisis shifted. Gone was the paralysis of silence. In its place came precision, authority, and tension thick enough to split the marble floor beneath them. The fact that the Prince of Wales bypassed every ceremonial checkpoint, no flags, no announcement, no escort, sent a signal to those inside. Something irreversible had either already occurred or was moments away. What stunned most was not just his presence, but who he passed. Queen Camilla stood waiting near the East Wing, a location carefully chosen for public optics. She was supposed to be seen first. Instead, she was disregarded, not once, but twice. The move shattered more than tradition, it exposed fracture lines within the very core of the monarchy. Within minutes of William's arrival, Catherine was seen being handed a sealed, leather-bound folder by a senior aide, its golden crest barely visible, but unmistakable in its meaning. She clutched it like a directive. Those near the corridor reported seeing her pale but resolute, exchanging no words with Camilla, who lingered outside the chamber door. There was no communication, no eye contact, no shared grief. Only strategy. Meanwhile, questions escalated around Princess Anne's absence. The Princess Royal, historically the monarchy's stabilizing force in times of upheaval, was neither seen nor mentioned. No vehicles linked to her office had been tracked. This was especially troubling for insiders, who expected her to play a decisive role in crisis management. The vacuum created by her silence allowed only one conclusion: the crisis had splintered even the most unshakable bonds within the House of Windsor. Palace staff, who had long served under Charles, found themselves torn between protocol and instinct. Several refused to respond to requests coming from Camilla's private office. Some redirected calls to William's crisis team without explanation. One senior chamberlain was even reported to have said, "Her Majesty is not to be looped in, orders are coming from the heir apparent now." This wasn't just a shift in authority, it was a freeze-out. And yet, amidst this silent storm of maneuvering, rumours began circulating of William carrying something far more potent than sympathy documents pre-signed by Charles weeks prior, granting temporary regency rights should his condition render him unfit for public duty. These weren't speculative drafts. These were activation papers, known only to a select circle within the Royal Sovereign Council. The implications of their arrival were staggering. Not only had succession been anticipated, but a mechanism had already been set in motion, one that left Camilla entirely outside the perimeter. But while power games were quietly erupting, one room remained locked, guarded and silent, where King Charles was finally seen in a moment no one was prepared to witness. Only one photo leaked, just a gloved hand gripping a signed document beside a faded medical folder. It wasn't meant to be seen. But what that single image revealed cracked open a deeper truth. This wasn't just a medical consult. It was an irreversible pivot in royal history. The photograph came and went in seconds, scrubbed from social feeds almost as quickly as it appeared. But those who captured it in time knew exactly what they were looking at. The hand, unmistakably regal in posture, held a Mont Blanc pen poised above parchment bearing the seal of the crown. And beside it, angled just enough to read, lay a weathered medical folder with the words, "Rapid Consult," neurological stamped across the front. It didn't take long for insiders to draw connections. This wasn't routine. This was a constitutional emergency dressed in medical garb. And the timing of the leak? Intentional, controlled. Someone wanted the world to know that King Charles had just crossed a line no monarch crosses lightly. What followed was a flood of whispers from within Windsor's inner sanctum. Multiple staff members began confirming the presence of nurse staff outfitted in uniforms, embroidered with a gold crest, a detail reserved for cases of extreme confidentiality, when royal health intersects with national security. These weren't just caregivers, these were operatives of trust, embedded to manage both care and containment. The very appearance of such a unit signaled one unspoken reality. The king's condition had reached a threshold, and the palace was no longer just managing optics, it was managing control. And then came the confirmation that sent chills down the spines of royal watchers. Charles had reportedly requested to summon both Princess Anne and Prince Edward separately. Not together, not as a united front, but one at a time. A move so deliberate, so strategic, that even palace veterans were caught off guard. These weren't emotional visits. These were consultations. And given the high probability that Charles had just signed what sources now call the succession trigger document, the significance of those meetings cannot be overstated. In this tense atmosphere, Camilla's absence grew louder than any words spoken. For the entirety of these crucial hours, she was not seen, not summoned, and not consulted. Even her private secretary was reportedly locked out of communications. The narrative that began to form was stark. Camilla was being edged out not by accident but by design. Her exclusion from bedside decisions, from internal briefings, and from the succession dialogue painted a picture of quiet dismissal, one that palace sources claim was decided days before the emergency even unfolded. The diagnosis itself remains sealed, but several insiders have confirmed a troubling classification: partial neurological incapacitation. This term, rarely used in public documents, carries legal weight. It means the monarch may remain alive, conscious and physically present, but no longer constitutionally competent to make rulings, sign laws, or maintain the crown's daily obligations. And if that is true, then Charles didn't just sign a document that night. He relinquished the throne in everything but name. And yet, just as rumours swirled of abdication talks, the royal balcony remained empty until a figure emerged that turned speculation into seismic dread. When the doors to the inner court opened, it wasn't William, Charles or Camilla who stepped out, but Catherine, Princess of Wales, dressed in understated royal navy. She gave no speech, no statement. But her silence spoke louder than thunder. Something irreversible had occurred behind those walls. The moment froze the nation. After hours of deafening uncertainty, the emergence of Catherine alone, unflanked by any senior royal, felt like a coded message from within the crown itself. She held a sealed red folder emblazoned with the royal crest, the kind only dispatched in moments of grave national consequence. Her grip was firm, her gaze lowered, but her walk was steady, unshaken by the weight she now appeared to carry. Journalists stationed beyond the barriers described her expression as mourning without a funeral, a quiet devastation cloaked in resolve. This was not the image of a consort awaiting instructions. This was a figure taking lead, walking in the shadow of an unseen decision that had already reshaped the monarchy, and yet it was the absence that thundered louder than any presence. No Camilla, no William, no Princess Anne or Prince Edward. Only two advisors in muted tones walked a few paces behind her, one of them reportedly from the Crown Legal Office, the other from the Royal Archives. Together, their presence hinted not at ceremonial tradition, but at logistical transition. Catherine had not stepped out as a figure of comfort, but as a carrier of consequence. For years, she had been intentionally shielded from operational affairs, kept at a strategic distance from the more controversial mechanics of succession planning. And now that curtain had been pulled back without warning. The whispers grew louder. Had she been granted interim authority? Was she now the designated custodian of the Crown's transitional framework in light of Charles's reported partial incapacitation? And more pointedly, had the Queen Consort been bypassed entirely? Every frame, every step, every second of Catherine's brief appearance fueled a narrative that had long simmered just below the surface. That she was the monarchy's chosen future, not merely by birthright or marriage, but by design. The public's reaction was instantaneous. A groundswell of emotional support erupted across social channels, newspapers, and public forums. Hashtags praising her composure, her dignity, her quiet strength surged within minutes. Where confusion had reigned, her appearance became an anchor. And in a world gripped by speculation, that image of Catherine holding the red folder became the unofficial emblem of a monarchy in transition. But as Catherine returned behind the palace doors, the nation waited for a voice it hadn't heard in days, until Charles broke his silence in a written statement with chilling undertones, typed, unsigned, and leaked within minutes. The weight of legacy cannot be borne by a trembling hand. Was it a resignation, a cry for help, or a final royal confession disguised as reflection? The letter's origins remain unknown, but every word reads like farewell. The letter appeared without warning, no insignia, no watermark, only the initials CR anchoring the bottom of the page like a fragile tether to the man it was presumed to be from. But its power came not from formality, it came from the tone. It wasn't the voice of a monarch addressing a nation. It was the voice of a man caught in the twilight of clarity, trying to make peace with an empire that no longer answered to him. Line after line spoke of time moving too quickly, of the mind wandering into fog, of memory becoming a stranger. There was no mention of Camilla, no tribute, no note of love or alliance. Instead, the focus was chillingly precise, to my rightful heirs, to those shaped not by tradition but by quiet resilience, to she who was watched without being watched. Within hours, the palace refused to comment on the letter's authenticity, which only deepened its mystique. But insiders close to the Royal Communications Office claimed the style was unprecedented, elegiac, symbolic, mournful. Nothing in the king's previous addresses hinted at such poetic vulnerability. What's more, the digital metadata suggested it hadn't been typed at Buckingham at all. Instead, whispers began to circle around Sandringham, where Charles reportedly spent several private days prior to the medical consult. It was there, some suggest, that the letter was written either as a preemptive gesture or as a contingency planned long before the crisis reached the public. Royal observers couldn't help but draw parallels to Queen Elizabeth II's final sealed letter still unopened and stored inside the Crown archives, to be read only under extraordinary constitutional change. That letter remains a mystery. But now, this ghost-written confession from Charles threatens to overshadow it entirely. Because this wasn't a public address, it wasn't sanctioned, it was raw, unfiltered, and never meant for the nation's eyes. And yet, the leak happened. Intentionally, surgically. A source close to the Crown suggested it came from someone inside the same individual reportedly present during Catherine's inner court appearance, someone described as a silent believer in the future, not the past. That leak changed everything. In one page, the king stripped away the protocols, the formalities, and revealed the very human collapse behind the crown. It was not an abdication in law, but in spirit, it read like one. And for many, it was the first time Charles's reign felt not just imperiled, but already over. The weight of that letter didn't just fall on the monarchy, it fell on Catherine, on William, and on a nation unprepared for the quiet implosion of a king's authority. But even as the world tried to pass the emotional weight of Charles's words, another headline roared through news feeds, one that forced Parliament into an emergency session. In a move not seen since Edward VIII, Parliament was summoned for a closed emergency session. And at its heart, a rarely used clause from the Royal Reformation Decree, authorising succession consultation in cases of prolonged incapacity. The palace hadn't just raised a medical alert, it triggered a constitutional firestorm. For decades, Clause 7.3 had existed in the shadows of royal protocol, its language deliberate, its implications devastating. Drafted under the late Queen's reign, it was intended as a legal contingency, never to be invoked unless the monarch could no longer fulfill the duties of sovereign judgment. But now, that ghost clause had been summoned into daylight, and with it came the full weight of royal machinery grinding into motion. A team of medical representatives, each sworn to secrecy, was dispatched to deliver confidential testimony directly to the Sovereign Council. Their findings would not be debated in public, they would be sealed, catalogued, and used as the foundation of a potential regency trigger. The Prime Minister, facing mounting pressure, refused to confirm or deny the nature of the session. "These are sensitive times," he said, offering only the kind of evasive tone that confirmed what he wouldn't say. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled to prepare emergency scripts and contingency briefings, while senior ministers whispered of a transition document drafted in advance, awaiting only the signal. That signal had come in the form of a red folder handed to Catherine hours earlier, and its contents now loomed over Westminster like a quiet but unstoppable tide. In an unprecedented move, Catherine was reportedly consulted directly before the parliamentary session, her input sought not as a figurehead, but as a stabilizing voice. This marked the first time in modern constitutional history that a Princess of Wales had been asked to weigh in on matters concerning monarchical continuity, particularly while the sitting monarch remained alive. Her words, whatever they were, would not be made public. But the fact she was asked at all told the nation everything it needed to know. Catherine was no longer being positioned for the future. She was now being trusted with the present. The omission of Camilla from all succession preparation documents did not go unnoticed. Legal briefings made available to senior MPs made reference only to interim authority vestment, stabilisation custodianship, and recognised heirs in line with legacy preference. Not once was the Queen Consort named. It was as if her chapter had quietly ended without formal declaration, her absence transformed from shocking to expected. The silence surrounding her status was not just political, it was strategic. Adding fuel to the fire, the royal legal advisor was seen leaving Windsor carrying a sealed white satchel, the same kind used during coronation signings and royal prerogative authorizations. Its destination was believed to be the Crown Office attached to Parliament, and what lay inside, many believe, was not a declaration, but an instruction. The monarchy was moving, not in rumour, not in theory, but in legal action. But as the legal machinery began shifting behind the curtain, one name surged forward with eerie precision, echoing from private archives, royal diaries, and a secret letter from Queen Elizabeth herself. A wax-sealed envelope bearing Queen Elizabeth II's private insignia was delivered to Catherine, in a velvet pouch, long before the public knew anything. It was said to contain a handwritten note meant to be opened in the hour of royal uncertainty. That hour had come, and its contents changed everything. The letter had been whispered about for years, a mythical document buried deep within the vaults of the royal collection, stored under conditions reserved for only the rarest pieces of crown legacy. Sealed in 2021, just months before Her Majesty's passing, it was marked not with a date, but with an instruction, to be opened upon the first sign of sovereign disruption. For a long time, palace officials debated whether such a moment would ever come. But now, as medical charts, succession clauses, and silence from the king collided, that moment arrived like a quiet thunderclap, and the envelope was handed directly to Catherine. Analysts were quick to verify the authenticity. The handwriting was unmistakably Elizabeth's, graceful, deliberate, and firm. But it wasn't the handwriting that stirred the monarchy. It was the message. In just under a page, the Queen laid out a private assessment of her granddaughter-in-law, drawn from years of silent observation. The words were measured but powerful, documenting moments most had missed. Catherine's composure during crisis, her restraint in provocation, her refusal to chase power even as others craved it. Then came the line that echoed through the walls of Windsor and into every corridor of Parliament. She shall not wait to be asked. She shall rise. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a ceremonial blessing. It was a posthumous declaration of preference, a queen affirming who she believed the monarchy's future should rest with, not by birth, but by character. For inner royal circles, the letter became a relic of divine timing, interpreted not just as guidance but as prophecy. Suddenly, decisions made over the last 24 hours were seen in a new light. Catherine's appearance in the courtyard, the folder, the consultations. It was as if the late Queen's words had already been felt before they were ever read. When the contents of the letter were inevitably leaked, the public response was instant and overwhelming. Support for Catherine surged beyond tradition or popularity. It became an emotional mandate. The nation no longer saw her as the princess beside the heir, but as the unspoken successor, quietly waiting in the wings. Any lingering doubt about the monarchy's future leadership evaporated, not through law but through legacy. The power of a monarch's final personal will had done what no speech or summit could. It redefined the center of gravity within the crown. But while the world watched Catherine ascend in calm certainty, Camilla prepared her final move, a press confrontation that would shatter her image forever. In a last-minute televised address, Camilla appeared visibly shaken, pleading for public understanding and unity. But her words were overshadowed by glaring absences: no acknowledgement from Charles, no support from William, and not even a nod from Catherine. The monarchy had spoken without uttering a single word. The broadcast was brief, unscheduled, and strangely timed. Without the official seal of approval from Buckingham Palace, it aired across national networks like a rogue signal, catching even veteran anchors off guard. Camilla, alone, seated before a pale backdrop, delivered what appeared to be a deeply personal plea, but as the minutes passed, it became painfully clear. This was not the voice of a queen consort commanding presence. This was the voice of a woman cornered by consequence. Her tone wavered. Her eyes, red-rimmed, avoided the camera. She invoked her years of loyalty through storms, her commitment to a role she claimed she never sought. But never once did she mention the condition of the king or the chaos that had unraveled in the last 72 hours. Not a word about succession. Not a breath about the rising voice of Catherine. Just a solitary appeal for grace from a nation already turning the page. Behind the scenes, palace sources were quick to disassociate. The address, they confirmed, was unsanctioned. The Royal Communications Office had not been briefed. No internal approval had been granted, and no member of the Sovereign Council had been consulted. In essence, it was a final act of desperation, an off-script confession in a carefully choreographed institution. Camilla, once central to the royal equation, had been excluded from the crisis entirely. This was her last bid to regain the narrative, and it failed. Public reaction was immediate and merciless. Social feeds erupted with disbelief. Commentators labeled the statement as self-preserving, off-key, and tone-deaf. What was meant to be a unifying gesture instead fractured the remaining sympathy around her. It wasn't just what she said, it was what she refused to say. The silence around Charles's condition, the absence of any recognition of Catherine's increasing role, the glaring omission of William's stabilizing leadership. It was as if she was speaking into a void, hoping to rewrite history in real time. But the world had already moved on. More damning than anything she uttered was the complete lack of response from the royal family. William remained silent. Catherine offered no acknowledgement. Even palace staff, once quick to release statements clarifying royal intent, issued nothing. Not even a denial. It was a silence that screamed, a silence that sealed her fate. The monarchy's choice had already been made, not by proclamation but by posture. And in that void, Catherine's quiet composure became the answer to Camilla's last question: who now holds the crown's trust? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update, because what happens next may alter the monarchy forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.